good evening and keep up the good work.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Reactor for today, February 19th, 2020. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. Hi, I'm Tristan, your host, and the host of YouTube channel Step Back History, and Tristan Won't Shut Up. I stream 3 days a week on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. On Mondays at 12 Eastern from noon to 2, I do a stream called Money Discourse with Mia Mulder, where we talk about things. I guess all my streams are where we talk about things, but I talk about things with Mia Mulder, which is different. On Tuesdays from 7 to 9 Eastern, I do Step Back Tonight, which is my evening show that I do with just me. Then on Fridays from 12 till 2, which you're watching right now, I do the Reactor, which is where people send me content via the Discord server. And I've already got a big old pile of things to look at today. We watch them together and react accordingly. I go by he, him pronouns. You can find my work at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. Also should mention that if you want to support my work, you could do so at patreon.com/stepbackhistory. Thank you for doing that. And while we're talking about supporting Step Back, I should also mention thank you, Alex Shendy, for subscribing during the sort of open of the stream. So thank you. Much appreciated. If you are on Twitch right now and you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime subscription every month. Just want to mention that you should use it, even if it is not for me. Although, it'd be great if you used it for me, but any Twitch creator would be glad to have your Twitch Prime subscription. And if you don't use it, Amazon basically just gets to keep your money. So use it for somebody. As for content that is coming up soon and stuff that you should know about, I have a new, what's it called? I'm working on the next videos in the things. I've got 3 projects, more or less, that are dominating my life right now. I've got a Tristan Won't Shut Up video that I've almost finished the script on. I'll probably be finishing it today. I've got a Step Back video that I'm going to try to make the outline of so that I can write the script next week. Yay. Then I have a secret project that I can't announce yet that I have to do research for. So good times, busy times. Next, this channel, it has a lot of new people coming in every day. So if this is your first time watching one of my streams, please make yourself known. We've got a very active chat community on both Twitch and YouTube. And so please say hello. New Maroon video was super interesting. Thank you. I wish more people thought that way. Been binging your stuff for the last week and a half. I really enjoy the content. You have a way of framing history that makes it enjoyable for me that I haven't really experienced before. Well, that is amazing. Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah. Well, friends, I guess there's no beating around the bush on this. Why don't we start watching content? This is a video submitted by a guy named Broncos Rock 602, which is about Vikings and romantic nationalism. So, instead of me, dicking around, why don't we go through? You've now seen every Step Back video. Holy moly. That's impressive. There are step back videos that I have completely forgotten that I've made. I still find them occasionally. Anyways, let's just put that in private session. Cool. He said whenever you make a video about a non-white man, it gets significantly less views. Is that still true? It is still true. I've made videos about non-white men for the last 3 releases in a row, and my channel has, like, massively suffered as a result because I gave up on my own rule, which is to do all, what's it called, 2 to 1, what I'm calling candy content, which is content that I know is going to do well, versus, 2 of those, which is basically videos about fascists and communists, because that's basically the only topics people like. And usually only white fascists and white communists. And for every 2 of those, I'm allowed to do 1 video on, like, non-white people or non-fascism or whatever. So that's life. That's, at some point I will have to reckon with that. Or for the most part, when I start a new series, hopefully it'll, build a momentum and audience of its own, essentially. Anyways, let's get the YouTube stuff going, shall we?
Ooh, today we are going to talk about a big old honking subject, but first of all, thank you very much to Daft Wee Haggis for your very generous coffee donation. That is super cool of you. You are a very generous and very daft haggis, so thank you very much indeed for that. If any of you guys would like to support the channel financially, I have a Ko-fi link in the description and in my banner art. But it is, of course, more than enough that you guys are here watching my videos. And it's so lovely. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for being here. Today we're going to talk about quite a delicate subject. We are going to talk about the idea that Vikings were white
this is one of those
supremacists.
Okay, there's some pictures, okay.
So, let's turn back the clock. Not quite as far as you think. We're going to turn back the clock to the Enlightenment, to the 18th century. So during the 18th century...
Coffee link, there's a website called Coffee. It's spelled K-O-F-I, and it's sort of like sort of a crowdfunding website for content creators. Like, I always think of it... I don't know why it's distinct. It's like having PayPal donation links, which I also have, but I don't have a coffee. But people seem to like the K-O-F-I link more than a PayPal account. But yeah.
People enjoyed reading classical literature. Towards the end of the 18th century, classical literature and classical Greek and Roman culture became very, very important, and it became very, very fashionable in Europe, in particular in places like the Germanies, in Italy, in France, and in the UK. And it was the UK at this point. So an awful lot of people are reading accounts by people like Tacitus and Julius Caesar, who talk about Germany. They talk about the Germans. When Julius Caesar and Tacitus talk about generic German people, they're talking about just that. They're talking about this generic lump of we don't know because we haven't invaded them. They're talking about the people of the forests east of the Rhine that they haven't got round to attacking yet. They don't know who's there. They haven't sent out...
What's this video? This video is about the Vikings and romantic nationalism.
Anthropological study parties to see who these Germans are. They just say, oh, the Germans live over there. When people in the Enlightenment read
by
these
the
accounts,
Welsh Viking,
they then think, okay, so there is this unified culture called Germania. There is this unified German culture in what is now modern-day Germany. 2 of the surprising people who you might not know subscribed to this idea were the Brothers Grimm. So Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm were writers working in Germany in the earlier part of the 19th century who wrote fairy tales, the Grimm's fairy tales. But they didn't just write fairy tales. What they were trying to do was prove that Germany had this single mythological past, that German culture comes from this single unified mythological
Yes, romantic
world.
nationalism did
They were
evolve into
trying to show
fascism,
that all these
correct.
fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood, and all of that, and the Pied Piper of Hamelin, were all drawn from the same Germanic well of myths and legends. They didn't really have any particular evidence for some of this, and they turned to some pretty wacky and wild sources. They looked at law codes from some of the medieval parts of the Holy Roman Empire and tried to link them and cross-reference them with fairy tales and folk tales to try to prove that they were all making these laws based off the same sources, and sometimes they were. And most of the time that source was the Bible. So the books that they started to write became really, really influential, and it becomes part of this romantic nationalist movement in Germany. I talk about this with Liz Capism in a video that we did a few weeks ago, which is really, really good fun. I recommend you go and watch that. This romantic nationalism that feeds German writers in the 19th century. And one thing that most of these people subscribe to, at least earlier on in the 19th century, is this Aristotelian idea of climate. Aristotle's climate theory is the theory that the people of Northern Europe live in a climate that is cold, which makes them brutish, it makes them primitive, they drink heavily, they fight all the time, they eat loads of red meat,
I mean, sounds like a fun
they worship
time.
their mothers and womenfolk. Okay. People south of the Mediterranean in Africa are lazy, they're lethargic, they are stupid, they don't learn, they don't work, they can't read, they never make anything of themselves.
So that's me.
People in the Mediterranean, literally the middle of the earth, are in the perfect middle zone. They are in the perfect middle zone, and therefore they are in the perfect position to become the fathers of democracy and child
What is this about? This is a video called The Vikings and Romantic Nationalism.
abuse. Perfect! So there's a lot of this going around in what becomes Germany, in the German-speaking world in Central Europe in the 19th century. I'm not even going to bother talking about Wagner. Wagner was a bit of a nutcase. His sister was even worse and was an actual genuine racist. Towards the end of the 19th century, a Brit stands up and takes the wacky Germanophilic crown. Houston Stewart f***ing Chamberlain. This guy is the whole deal. If you want a late Victorian pseudoscientist nutter that basically invented Nazism, I found you one. So as a kid, this guy was a liberal Francophile who refused to speak English because he thought French was more beautiful. He then had a religious experience whilst listening to a Wagner opera and decided that Germany was the most wonderful thing that anybody had ever created, and he was going to become the most German creature on earth. At one point, this guy is known as Hitler's John the Baptist. Gross. So Chamberlain writes a really, unfortunately, influential book that is entirely made up. It's all complete garbage, and it's called The Foundations of the 19th Century. I've read it, it's awful, I read it for you, you do not need to read it. If you have half a brain, it will make you super angry. It is full of absolutely hog-wild nonsense. He uses the term the Jew, for a start. He claims that all ancient Europeans, the Romans, the Greeks, the Latins, the Celts, were Aryans, which is a meaningless term to describe white people in this context. The actual Aryan civilization was kind of from Central Eurasia, so it's really funny that these people have latched onto this term. But in terms of the Aryans being these white superhumans, it has no basis in science, archaeology, anthropology, cultural history, or anything else. He goes on to say that the top of the pile...
I love that, like, before the 20th century, everything that had to do with, like, philosophy and history and medicine and science seems to just have been like, I don't know, I'm a white dude, I just made shit up that has nothing connected to reality, but it seems to be true to me, so therefore it's objective fact. And then today when we're like, well, science shows this isn't actually all that accurate, and then fucking weirdos show up in your comments being like, oh, you're trying to change the past, you're a revisionist, and I'm like, interesting, okay, that's, oh boy.
pile in terms of the races of people are the Nordic people. They are blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
You're finally awake.
Stereotypical Superman. This is where it all
Nords.
comes from. This guy, this f***ing dude is where all of this comes from. A 19th century
It has been an honor, Gar Lulfric.
posh British idiot. He is convinced that the Nordic people are at the top of the pile. He also thinks that Jewish people invented Roman Catholicism and democracy as a failed sociological experiment.
Can we just erase the 19th century from history? Unfortunately, we can't. But this was the case of, like, everybody from, like, the... I don't know, it just seems to be, like, the way that European thought worked until, like, the mid-20th century. It's just, like, whatever the fuck my first instinct is about whatever anything is, apparently is the true thing. And this was basically the way that white men seem to have, like, written about philosophy and science and everything until, like, they were either just making shit up off the top of their head and assuming that it was right because, I don't know, seems to work. This is my theories about people from Africa. I've never met one, never been there, but I am 100% convinced. Or they were just cribbing notes from the Arabs. Those are basically the two things they did.
He also claims that the Jewish people...
Yeah, it explains a lot of Twitch streamers, doesn't it?
Invented China. He proves this by saying, get this, neither of them has any culture. Absolute psycho. He says that the Germans and the Jewish race have been in mortal combat since forever because Jewish people want to enslave the whole world.
Again, for, like, what's it called? Just extracted from the asses of random people. Oh boy, 19th century anti-Semitism.
Made up, obviously, by him. He was nuts. This guy was full on 100% cuckoo bananas on the loopy juice. He was criticised heavily in Germany, where he moved, obviously, for becoming an Überdeutsch. He wanted to be more German than the Germans. He would actually argue with people from Germany and claimed that he knew more about Germany.
Oh no, he was like a German weeb. He was like a weeb for German stuff. He was literally a Wehraboo.
Than German scholars because he had this religious experience listening to Wagner. The man was just an absolute nutcase. Perhaps most frighteningly of all, in this book, he comes up with the term the Jewish problem, and he asks his readers to come up with a final solution to it. It is scary how much of what the Nazi Party spouts in the 30s and 40s is lifted from a book made up.
Or what do they call the Wehrabus
lunatic
who are obsessed with, like, what's it called?
Made up.
Like World War I shit.
The idea that these northern Nordic Europeans are some kind of super race is based on nothing more than this vague 19th century dream world where Germany is the ideal and the worst of Germans is better than the best of any.
I mean, if this is the case, then the Germans are secondary to, like, Swedish people. So, which means I think that the caramel dancing girls are of the highest order in this guy's hierarchy.
Other country because they are descended from some mythical Nordic German race that never existed. So just to reiterate, all of this is totally made up bullcrap from a loser who couldn't make friends. Okay? Cool. Moving on. We've now got the roots of this. We've got the roots of this crazy Nordic idea that the Nordic people...
It's like every Western philosopher is just like the rantings and ravings of some guy from the 19th century who had no friends.
With Jewish and non-white people. Let's talk about Hermann Wirth. So Hermann Wirth was a pseudo-historian and Germanomaniac, born in the Netherlands, who got a PhD in music, taught Dutch for a bit, lost a series of lecturing jobs for being crap, got kicked out of several universities for being a nutter, joined the Nazi Party in 1925, where he was welcomed with open arms because he was a massive racist dick, and, I mean, look at him, what a nerd. Like, would you trust your child with this man? I don't think so.
I was listening to this podcast last night that showed, that was talking about this, like, this really, like, runaway project to to show how easy it is for people to fall into fascism, but it was like done with like this extremely traumatic experiment on children, and how the people who got the most into it were sort of these people who didn't cause a lot of problems. Like they weren't like, delinquent children, but they also weren't very successful at school. They were just sort of like quiet losers. And that these were the kinds of people who, when like the opportunity to be part of something greater than yourselves, i.e. like, belonging to finding some like, simple way to explain why you're better than other people, like that resulted in like those people are the ones who became the most fanatic supporters of like the whole fascist regime. And it's like, oh yeah, that explains a lot about like the kinds of people who became Nazis, but also like the kinds of people who became Proud Boys and the people who are like involved with like the alt-right today.
So Wirth translated this book called the Oera Linda book. The Oera Linda book, called Ora Linda book, is a fake document claiming to be written in Old Frisian. So if you are Frisian, you are from this area. It is supposedly full of ancient Frisian mythological symbolism. It was proven to be a fake very, very quickly when it was first discovered in the 1860s, but it is still used as a source for many neo-pagan religions today, and it is just wacky stuff in there. It claims that there was an ancient island culture on this nation that bridged Northern Europe and North America, and this ancient island culture was called, you guessed it, Atlantis.
Oh boy.
So Milo and the gang were all made up of this advanced Aryan civilization. There's that word again, Aryan, which doesn't mean anything in this context. It is useless and stupid. They had a monotheistic religion with a goddess that inspired Judaism and Christianity.
Listen, someone said, wasn't Marx a philosopher, though, who only had one friend? I mean, all right, Marx had some, like, pretty good insights into the nature of capitalism. He also was kind of an asshole, and no one liked him, and he was kind of a loser who just, like, what's it called? All the people trying to spy on him and stuff like that just, like, found that he mooched off of his friends and drank constantly, which, like, is an aesthetic, I guess. But, like, he doesn't seem like he was a very pleasant person to know, despite, him having a pretty good idea of, like, theory or whatever.
When Wirth translated the book, of course, he twisted that into the Jews stole our religion because he was a racist and an anti-Semite. So he actually joined Hitler's SS and founded the Ahnenerbe with Heinrich, definitely an Aryan, blonde, blue-haired super god, look at me now, Himmler, which was a research...
Think anything be done to give those people purpose without making them fascists? I mean... I think that there's something to be said about how a lot of these people who feel listless and disconnected have done so because of the, like, everyone for themselves nature of our, like, everyone's got, like, a everybody's out for themselves type mentality in Western culture. Like, it's very individualistic to the point where, like, nobody has any community, nobody knows each other, nobody has, like, time to develop a lot of strong friendships that are not outside of your nuclear family. And, like, yeah, that is the place where people would belong. People belong to a community, people belong to each other, that kind of thing. But, of course, that being stamped out because of capitalism leads people to feel listless and lack any sort of roots or connections with other people. And then when somebody says, hey, you can have that, it's becoming fascist. It's like, oh, that's sort of the pain that they latch on to.
Organization, the Ahnenerbe. And it was basically just there to justify the Nazi idea that Germans were descended from a biologically superior race of Aryan supermen. Complete nonsense, made up by a British loser. It is a machine to perpetuate their made-up nonsense. Himmler kicks Wirth out of the Ahnenerbe because his views are too wild, which tells you something, and Himmler uses the Ora Linda book so much that it is to this day known as Himmler's Bible. So everything that Heinrich, totally a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German
talk a little bit
Himmler,
about the idea of fool socialism, about like how all of the inequalities and structural pain of the world that we live in involves needing to have like, you know, a systemic critique of everything. And instead of thinking that it's like racial groups or individual bad people that you wield conspiracies around, that's weak. That, like, you know, is wrong. It's simple and easy, but it's wrong. And the harder, more important way to critique the way the world works is to have the more structural analysis of the systems that make and perpetuate suffering and inequality, essentially. I'm writing a script for Tristan Won't Shut Up right now. That's almost done, and I talk a little bit about it in the video. And Matthew, thank you for the super chat. And I did not know it's Democracy Now's 10th anniversary. For some reason, I always thought Democracy Now! Was older. Like, I thought it was like a radio show from the 90s, but I guess it's only 10 years old. Man, feels like it's been around forever. 25 years ago. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Used to justify his monstrous actions comes from this made-up book. Badly.
Yeah, I was about to say, I have actual memories of listening to Democracy Now! From before 2011. So I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But it might have, like, belonged to something else before or something like that.
Translated by a Dutch musicologist. What a loser. So during the Second World War, Himmler also claims that bog bodies are evidence that ancient peoples massacred and ritually buried their gay populations. What? Total nonsense, made up by a creepy weasel-faced little loser. So some of these people after World War II...
What is his channel's name? It's The Welsh Viking.
Execution and imprisonment after the Nuremberg trials, and they go on to spread their made-up racist nonsense. That's why this exists. That is why this...
Can we just flood the country already? Yeah, like the Dutch have like literally built a wall to keep Mother Nature, which obviously wishes to erase the Netherlands.
Concept of the Vikings being white supremacist and being somehow superior exists. It's nothing to do with anything that the Vikings wrote. If you are expecting me to tell you that they twisted sources from the Viking period, that's not where this is going, because there aren't any. There are no sources from the Viking period that suggest in any way that they were white supremacists. The Vikings didn't think that they were some kind of noble super race. Alright? They just didn't. There is no evidence. Don't come at me in the comments, because you are wrong if you think that.
It's like the Vikings didn't really have much of a higher like calling at all. I thought they were mostly just like, I like gold, it's shiny, let's go sail over here and take some.
Promise you I've looked. I promise you I have looked. I looked through the sagas. Oh, there's somebody called Blue. The blue means he was black, which meant that they didn't like black people. Bullshit. It's not what it means. Talk nonsense. Oh, they used the word Skraeling to describe Native American people. That meant that they were racist against North Americans. No, it's not. They didn't even use that word before the 12th century, so it's highly unlikely that they actually used that word at all.
Yeah, Vikings just be like, what if I had a pet bear? Like that's the limit of that's like what the Vikings' higher calling was like.
Oh my god. It's made up nonsense, guys. The Vikings were not white supremacists. The concept of white supremacy...
What if I made letters on a really big rock to tell a story about how awesome I am? What's it called? Vikings, like, for all they are, their motivations were not complicated. And I feel like I'm kind of jealous of it.
Dude. What? Are you a white supremacist? The hell is one of those? Yeah, I rest my case. See, he has no idea. He has no idea. You have no idea. I got no idea. He has no idea. The concept would have been alien to them. The idea that white people are somehow biologically superior to non-white people, that's crazy. They were working for non-white people in the Byzantine Empire. Vikings, these noble blonde-haired supermen, were working for non-white people. They were trading with them. They were living with them. They were marrying them. We've got people of African origin living and working in Viking Age Scandinavia and York. We have their bones. The exceptional thing about the Vikings wasn't that they were brutal, racially pure.
Where do I watch
Northern
Democracy
Europeans,
now?
YouTube. They weren't brutal
I watch it on YouTube.
and primitive at all. They were a highly advanced, sophisticated society.
That's what I do when
They
I'm
just
having my
happened
morning
to
coffee.
not be Christian at a time where Christians were writing bad stuff about non-Christians. They were big players in an international trading network that went from North America to China, for goodness sake. That is what is exceptional about the Vikings, not the fact that most of them were white. And yeah, most of them were white, but I'm white, and I'm certainly not a white supremacist. There is no evidence at all that they were white supremacists, or that they were racists. They lived with, they loved, they married, they traded with, and they worked with and for non-white people from all over their trading world.
They believed that no matter what color you were, you probably had gold, and so their dragon ships could come and take it.
They welcomed Islamic and Arabic people into their communities, like Ibn Fadlan, who wrote about their cultures and their way of life. They welcomed them.
Yeah, there's actually a book called Eaters of the Dead, which is sort of a dramatization of that kind of a thing.
With open arms into their communities. And some of them even went back down to the south. Europe was absolutely dependent on the Mediterranean in the Viking period. Europe was not dependent on the Vikings at all. It really wasn't, guys. I'm really sorry. If you think that the Vikings were the centre of medieval Europe, you are absolutely barking up the wrong tree. I'm really sorry. So, were the Vikings...
Center of the medieval world being the Viking. Center of the medieval world was fucking Baghdad.
White supremacists? No. Of course not. That was all made up in the 19th century. And then it was jumped on by a bunch of angry German and Austrian mega losers who managed to keep power for, 12 years? And then they all killed themselves. Oh, and if you think that the Vikings were white supremacists, or you use the Vikings or their symbolism to promote your white supremacist ideals, you're a loser. You're a massive loser, and I feel sorry for you. So, thank you very much once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video.
Alright, that was good. Alright, next up we got... Oh, shit. Okay, we got... I love how, like, people are starting to dig up, like, retro Canada stuff. There's a YouTube channel called Retro Ontario, which is always, like, such a mood to go through. To just show how weird, like, 80s and 90s Ontario stuff was. Yeah. So this is a Body Break, which was like a sort of like exercise shorts that happened during in the 90s. So let's watch one of these, shall we?
Body Break with Hal Johnson and Joanne McLeod.
Oh man, takes me back.
How many times have you heard someone say they have to go in because their feet are cold or sore? Well, that's mainly because their boots don't fit properly.
Your boots are most important and the most difficult piece of ski equipment to purchase. So when buying or renting boots, you should always look for fit first.
Skiers are too often swayed by flashy ads, color, or promises of performance. There are, however, a few things that can help take the confusion out of that important purchase.
Hal Johnson
Go
did
to a
have a
store
pretty
that
good
has a
mustache.
well-trained and knowledgeable sales staff. Know your own foot. If it's wide or skinny, flat or with a high arch. And lastly, Be honest about your ability when speaking
And
to a
these two were
salesperson.
married, if I remember correctly,
If you're a
too.
beginner, you should look for a soft, flexible boot that is forgiving to mistakes.
But if you're a more advanced skier, boots should be rigid with little flex so they respond quickly.
One way to break in your new boots before you go skiing is to wear them at home for 20 minutes. 3 to 5 times should do it. So until next time, keep fit and have fun.
Yeah, because remember Joanne McLeod actually did an interview lately. Well, not lately. This was probably like almost a... This is the thing. I'm getting to the age now where it's like, oh, yeah, like that thing I read the other day. And then I found out that I read it like 10 years ago. But there was an article with Joanne McLeod about how she got so much shit while doing this show because her husband, like the show is on her husband is not white. And that got some interesting letters sent their way. And she did like a whole interview about how that was like a source of stress for them and stuff. Okay.
Body break.
Oh, the 80s or 90s. Thing is that in Canada, the 80s lasted like probably like until the late 90s. So what you would consider 80s aesthetic was sort of like a multi-thing aesthetic. And oh my, is that it is. Good old Name Explain. I haven't seen a Name Explain video in a dog's age. This is going to be fun. Thought dude was just tan. No. This is Patrick. I've done some collaborations with Patrick in the past. So what is this one about? This is called The Job That Ruined the Name Abigail. Oh boy. From One Virtue. Oh no. Dutch. What a Dutch name. So let's see where this goes.
Gosh, I'm becoming my father. An old confused man. Not good. Hello all my exciting Keiths, my name is Patrick and welcome to Fun with First Names, where each week we look into the meaning, origin and some extra fun facts behind one specific first name. And this week we are looking to the first name of Abigail. Though before we do that, I just want to say a huge thank you as we finally reached our goal of 1,000 followers on Instagram. Thank you everyone who did go follow me on there. Still, obviously, please do go follow me on there. It's really great fun to get to share some really...
Everyone's really hitting on the Instagram real hard. I don't get... I haven't never put much energy into Instagram. I don't know what the thing is.
Really fun stuff on there. And as I promised, I shared a really exciting announcement on there, which you can go check for yourself. And of course, I want to share a huge thank you to everyone who decided to support Name Explain on Patreon.
I don't know what the idea of... I don't know what the point of Instagram is, but I know that, like, Instagram is just, like... I don't know. Like, everybody's, like, looking into it these days.
The most recent week. Patreon really is the best way to go support Name Explain. Just costs $1 a month, gets you loads of extra goodies, ad-free videos, a chance to say what names get explained, bonus content like podcasts and blog posts. There's so much on there. Go check it out. There'll be a link down below. And the people who became Patreon this week include Tom Barrap, Megan Peterson, Juana. Really, apologies if I missed anyone else, and thank you for supporting on there. Anyway, on with today's name of Abigail, and something I like about the name Abigail is it's one of those names that can be split both ways. It can become just Abby, or it can become just Gail. That's really cool. I always love where a name can become a nickname with the latter part of it, like my name, Patrick.
Also, Penelope. Penelope is like one of the most versatile names you can have.
Become just Rick. Abigail is a name of Hebrew origins, where in Hebrew it is Avigail. What's interesting about the name Abigail is that despite it being traditionally a girl's name, if you're called Abigail, you're actually kind of named after your dad. Like, if you're called Abigail and your dad's name sounds nothing like Abigail, you're still kind of named after him. This is because the name Abigail in Hebrew means my father is joyful. So not only are you named after your father, you're actually named after...
Versatile? Well, Penelope is a versatile name because of it's got like it has kind of like that classical gravitas, but also if you like, it has like a multiple names you can make out of it, like how William can become Will and Bill and like Willie and like all that kind of stuff. Penelope can become Penny. You can be Peggy. You can be those are the two big ones.
After his state of being as well, which is quite unique, that's for sure. The name comes from the Hebrew Ab, meaning father, and the Hebrew Goyal, meaning joy. Why would someone be named after the fact that their father is joyful? Well, in all honesty, I'm not too sure, but it's really nice to know that your father is joyful. Maybe he's joyful because of you, because of your birth, because you're his daughter. In fact, some actually think the name doesn't mean my father is joyful, and they believe it actually means my father's joy.
Where the hell does Peggy come out of Abigail? I don't know, but no, it doesn't come out of Abigail. Peggy comes out of Penelope. I was talking about the name Penelope.
This makes a ton more sense. You are your father's joy. Your father's joy is you. It just makes more sense in my eyes, definitely. The my father is joyful idea seems to be more prominent, but I kind of prefer this idea. It's just nice being called your father's joy, in my eyes anyway. Like in a lot of cases, this name became popular thanks to the Bible, that big book of names. Well, it's a big book of names.
Peggy
in our
comes
case
from
anyway.
Margaret.
I think there's a tad more to.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of Margaret. I wasn't thinking of Penelope. Because Margaret is the one where you can be Peggy, you can be Maggie, you can be Marge, you can be... yeah, you can be Maggie, you can be... yeah, Margaret's a really fucking versatile name. There's a lot of nicknames you can mine out of it.
To the Bible than just popular baby names. Abigail is the name of one of David's wives, and throughout the Bible, she refers to herself as David's handmaid. And it's from here that the name took on a brand new
Some people
meaning.
even go with Margie,
Apparently,
which
in
is
the
like a
early
weird
19th
one.
century, female maids were referred to by the name Abigail. Like, even if that wasn't their name, they were just an Abigail. It was just the go-to term for maids, female maids specifically. Kind of like the help, I imagine. Kind of like just the term, the help. Just, where are the Abigails? That's what people probably say. Or, you're an Abigail, just like that. Maids were called Abigails all because of the original Abigail in the Bible referring to herself as David's handmaid. That really set the scene for this name. However, it seems this wasn't a particularly endearing term, as the name Abigail actually really fell out of popularity in the early 20th century, because it was also a go-to term for maids. No one wanted their kids to have a name so heavily associated with maids, because being a maid wasn't the most highly regarded job, unfortunately, despite how stupidly important it is, like cleaners, maids, anything like that. Hugely important. Oh, my voice went a minute there, that was weird. It's a shame for multiple reasons, not only because this career path was so looked down upon, but because it took the name Abigail with it. But this really doesn't seem to be the case these days. Abigail has really bounced back. Abigail is the 11th most popular girl's name in the USA, so hugely popular right now. And it's the 83rd most popular girl's name here in the UK, so not as popular over here, but still pretty darn popular. What's interesting about the name Abigail is despite the fact it's so popular right now, and it has been in more recent years, and it was popular way back in like the 19th, 20th, like early 20th century, because it wasn't that popular in the mid 20th century to sort of somewhat early 20th century as well, it means we don't have many like middle-aged famous Abigails right now. There are some, but there just weren't that many. I was trying to think of a famous de facto Abigail, and none were really coming to mind. So instead I found some famous old Abigails and some famous new Abigails. This includes Abigail Adams and Abigail Fillmore, who were the first ladies of John Adams and Millard Fillmore, former US presidents. They were president a long time ago. Like I said, this is when the name Abigail was still somewhat popular before it went down with the maids. And like I said, as the name Abigail is now really popular again, we've got a lot of famous young Abbies. Like I found an Abby Butcher, who's apparently a TikTok star. I don't know, but apparently she's a very popular Abby. I googled popular Abbies and most of them were TikTok or YouTubers, so there you go. Gosh, I'm becoming my father. No confused man, no good. And in our last lap around the alphabet, I found a famous wrestler with these names. We've done that now, so for this lap around, I'm going to find a famous video game character with these names in each episode. And for Abigail,
I forgot that Patrick's really into wrestling. I don't know, I don't get it.
I found Abigail Anderson, one of the main characters in The Last of Us Part 2. She was amazing in that game. That game in general is incredible anyway, and she was such an amazing addition. She was like the highlight of that game, for me anyway. Loved Abby in that game. What a good game, really. Go play it if you haven't already. It's amazing. But anyway, that's just about everything I wanted to share about the name Abigail. But what are your thoughts on this name? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you know anyone with the name Abigail? Are you called Abigail yourself? Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, I just want to share some of the thoughts you guys had on last week's name of Zelda. Constantine the Carafac said,
All right, interesting. The next one is, okay, this is called, Is It Possible to Kill Kim Jong-un? It's interesting, because he's like, what's it called? He reportedly died like 3 times last year. You remember that? All right, let's see what this is all about.
All these bodyguards goes.
Oh, this is that person again this is that person that we skipped this last time. Okay, let's look at the psychology of collapse. That should be fun. That sounds like a family-friendly good time. Psychology collapse from St. Andrew, who I recently did a collaboration with, so let's do this.
I'm in mood. Honestly, dealing with the world and everything that's going on all the time is so exhausting. I try to take breaks pretty regularly, but it's not like I can ignore everything that's falling apart. I can't lie to myself and say this is fine when it really isn't. And I'm not alone. My network of peers and comrades, we're all dealing with similar feelings of exhaustion and hopelessness over the state of the world and our future.
Are
It got me
you
thinking,
a
got
virgin?
me researching about what people are going through in such a stressful time, how they're
Very,
responding,
what's it called? Very weak attempt at trolling there, bud.
how we can deal with all this. I've looked at a variety of sources, as well as drawing from my own experience.
Why was it skipped? Apparently, like this YouTube channel that we skipped the video on. Last time we talked about it, and apparently the channel's done by like some like weird right-wing libertarian. We just were like, it was, and people have said it's like full of like, the channel is like notoriously full of misinformation and propaganda. So you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna give that attention.
To come to a sort of self-theory about how my fellow humans and I are dealing with this collapse. I don't think I need to dive too deeply into what I mean by collapse. I'm referring to the degradation of society by businesses and states, the destruction of our environment, and the devastation of our human potential. The culmination of all the interlocking issues that plague our modern life. The acceleration of the processes that will lead to the end of the world as we know it. I want to look at people's awareness of what we face and how people are responding, and perhaps do my best to provide some sense of what we can do and how we can shake ourselves and others out of inaction. I'm splitting this video into 2 sections to keep things organized and easy to follow. First, stages of awareness, which I've largely pulled from Paul Schifferka's Climbing the Ladder of Awareness, links below. I'll use Morty as a stand-in to walk you through the stages.
Yeah, St. Andrew.
After
St.
that,
Andrew's cool.
we look at responses to collapse once people are aware. Let's begin.
He's the one who pitched the maroon video idea to me.
Stage 1. Dead asleep.
Take care of progress
At
weapon.
this stage, Morty's just vibing. Of course, you can see that there's some issues in the world here and there, but that can be fixed, right? All we gotta do is organize a bit better, change our behavior slightly, maybe tweak the rules a little bit, and then we'll be fine, right? Right? Stage 2. Awareness of one fundamental problem. Okay, so it seems everything is not cash money. Morty just found out about systemic racism, or imperialism, or overfishing, or dying sea turtles, or plastic pollution, or fracking. And he's a bit freaked out. He's panicking and mobilizing, or at least bringing awareness to the issue. He's just trying to get people's attention. Just so they know, hey, something is wrong, let's fix it. That one problem seems to consume him entirely. So he keeps learning, and he keeps exploring, and, well, stage 3. Awareness of many problems. The more Morty learns, the more he worries. He takes in all sorts of information now, and begins to see how complex and multifaceted the world's problems are. Now it's hard for him to even prioritize which issue needs to be dealt with first. In fact, he's so overwhelmed that he may be reluctant to acknowledge new problems. For example, if Morty's become aware of and is fighting against climate change, he might be reluctant to recognize indigenous oppression and environmental racism. He might feel like, I'm not going to do the impression. Oh, geez, Rick. I'm already dealing with so much, you know? I don't want to get distracted with so much other stuff. Alas, Morty cannot ignore the other problems forever. Not unless he wants to keep running in circles. Stage 4. Awareness of the interconnections between many problems. It's beginning to dawn on poor Morty that no solution is without its problems. He sees that shutting down factory farms might lay off millions and leave perhaps hundreds of millions without a complete meal. Or perhaps he recognizes that our efforts to raise the standard of living in the developing world through industrialization is just accelerating the Earth's destruction and profiting a very select few. Morty has begun to ascend in some sense. He's thinking on the system level now, beyond the symptoms towards the source. Perhaps there is no one solution. Perhaps the gravity of such a solution may be too much to bear. At this point,
Hello,
Morty
Rachel.
is likely withdrawn to discuss these issues with like-minded individuals, like small discussion groups, so they can explore the depths of the issues. Stage 5. Awareness that the predicament encompasses all aspects of life. Morty is beyond woke now. He might even pine after ignorance, as he realizes that this series of problems, or rather, this all-encompassing, capital P predicament, includes everything we do, how we do what we do, how we relate, and how we affect the entire world. The predicament is so massive, Morty perhaps comes to a point where he's just like, there is no capital S solution to this capital P predicament. No easy answer, no quick fix. He can't do it alone, so now what? Shafurka believed that each stage contains roughly a tenth of the number of people as the one before it. So for example, he believed that 90% of humanity might be on stage 1, but only 1 in 10,000 people might be at stage 5. FYI, I haven't seen any evidence of this, and I disagree personally. And he makes it clear that it's just his personal observation, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to go through different responses people have to collapse, again borrowing from my own research.
Can you link this tuber? Sure. Always happy to promote St. Andrew. Pretty good
Slumber.
YouTuber.
I'd say a good chunk of people fall into this category. Perhaps they catch a whiff of what's going on and decide to just turn over and go back to sleep. To embrace ignorance purposefully, disregard new information, and shun any understanding of what's going on. Perhaps they're guarding their fragile sanity, which is understandable. But we need to face these issues, because they're not going anywhere. What we need right now is courage. Denial. This is where people, when faced with reality, reject it and construct their own. Or they search for information that comforts them, rather than exposes them to the truth. They construct a media bubble that shields them, or a social circle that can protect them and reaffirm their core beliefs. Everyone is capable of denying reality, but it's become quite prevalent in the age of technology, where we can easily shut out any truths that make us uncomfortable. Like, for example, losing an election, or the reality of human-caused climate change. Apathy. Easy come, easy go. Little high, little low.
Oh no, it's the Zoomers.
Anyway the wind blows doesn't really matter to these people. No motivation, no feeling, the embrace of utter grey. Like slumber and denial, people respond with apathy to protect themselves in some way. After all, if nothing really matters, there's no need to try, no need to think, no need to bother. Bombarded by the media with distant pains, it's easier to just disconnect. Retreat into one's shell, or alternatively, well, let's continue. Preoccupation. This isn't more the fault of the system, where people these days are real busy. Like, not everyone can afford to invest in exploring and understanding the world's problems, even if the threat is so existential that their office busy work or retail slavery would ultimately amount to nothing. I'm not talking about those people though. I'm talking about the people who respond to the issues of the world by distracting themselves with busy work, constructing a convenient excuse to not challenge the structures they are under or maintain, like they're running away from the predicament. But the predicament of collapse catches up to all of us, sooner or later. Hedonism. On the flip side, the people who busy themselves with busy work are the people who dive into mindless consumerism. This is coupled with apathy to some extent. If nothing matters and everything's falling
This video is
apart,
reminding me why I
might
drink.
as well
Yeah, I
just
know.
consume, indulge, distract yourself with games, music, partying, drugs, and drinking. It's like slumber, except you're aware of the reality and are choosing to plug your ears. But at least, for those that plug their ears, they don't face overwhelmment. Yes, I'm inventing a word. That's what language is for. Deal with it. The predicament that is collapse is quite complex and multifaceted. Some people respond by trying to wrap their minds around it all, and they just end up losing their minds altogether. There is no human mind that can consume and comprehend every minute problem that we face. That's why we're a social species. We're supposed to be working together to understand collapse. As individuals, it can be hard to deal with something so complex, abstract, far-flung, and frightening. We're going
Existential
to come
Crisis
together,
Friday, for
not
real.
just subject ourselves to a form of self-torture via mental isolation with humanity's existential threats. Don't fall for overwhelmment. Blind hope. This is a trap that a lot of us almost naturally fall into. Humans are biologically predisposed towards optimism, the general attitude or belief that a specific endeavor or outcomes in general will be positive and desirable. We tend to hold on to hope in some future outcome that'll just, work out. That's why I call it blind. It can't adjust to the ever-shifting reality of the situation. It goes beyond rose-tinted glasses. It's more like it's a whole VR headset. We lose our ability to see clearly and take realistic, necessary action. We give up on our agency and leave things in the hands of the leaders or the experts. We stay passive. We waste time. Precious time that could be spent on real harm reduction, just going with the flow. We prevent necessary conversations with blind hope when we fixate so much on whether we can fix it and how we can fix it without considering what we need to do if we can't fix it. What happens then? Blind hope manifests in a few different forms, which I'll get into next. But let me address those in
Do you have any
stage
content
one
coming
time.
for Black History Month? I think it'd be pretty cool if you talked about black inventors in America. Well, I already made one. It was about maroons in Jamaica. It came out last week or the week before.
Right now. Blind hope inevitably leads to disappointment. Waiting forever for a future that won't come, that exists solely in your mind, irrespective of reality. It's ultimately a form of denial, but it's the woke kind of denial. Ultimately, it takes a bit of a journey to move towards a greater level of emotional maturity. But once we can get rid of false hopes, like the idea that somehow we'll reverse the damage our plans has been dealt scot-free, well, we can strengthen our resolve and prepare for what has already been set in motion. To take action with the knowledge that
Some Maroons in Puerto Rico joined the Taino. I thought they were wiped out by Columbus. They weren't wiped out by Columbus. They were mostly wiped out by Columbus, but they did survive. It was thought that they had not made it to modern day, but it seems that they're still around.
no, our leaders are not going to do anything substantially enough, and no, this moves far beyond reform. It's a hard pill to swallow, but if you can take it, you'll be better off for it. You'll be better at resisting. We really don't need blind hope. Individual change. These are the people with blind hope that, with a few tweaks here and there, we can continue our perpetual growth easy peasy.
I'm
All we
glad
gotta
you
do
guys
is
liked the
switch to
video there,
veganism,
Duke.
Recycle, and maybe carpool every once in a while, and the world's ills are good as gone. They place stock and blame in individuals entirely, ignoring wider structures or society. Progress worship. I do want to do a video on how our understanding of progress has been so corrupted, but this is tied to the blind hope I was talking about. There's almost a cult of progress out here, that any and all growth is good, that no matter the consequences on finite earth, we can just expand and expand, eternally. Those who worship progress blindly place a lot of trust in folks like Elon Musk and other so-called tech geniuses to just solve all our problems. They have an absurd level of techno-optimism, believing that with a little innovation, we can solve every problem on Earth, without accounting for the risks and consequences of current or future technology. They tend to fall into the trap of capitalist realism, losing any sense of alternatives to the current, environmentally and socially destructive economic order. They also tend to feel privileged by the current order, or at least comfortable enough with it to not want to threaten it. Leader worship. There are a lot of people who just have the utmost faith in our leaders, who believe that once we just get the right people in office, things will work out. But as Michael Jackson famously said, they don't really care about us. The truth is, the system corrupts even the best intentions. Politicians are a class into themselves, and their actions reflect
Sorry, I'm stuffed up.
their own interests. Nation-states, governments, rulers, it's in their job description to maintain structures that ultimately harm humanity as a whole. There's only so much they can do to affect the status quo.
I guess.
Placing our salvation in their hands is an exercise in futility. Investing your future in the confines of electoralism is a waste. But it also demonstrates how effectively mass media and schooling has broken down and limited our imagination. You can call it statist realism, the idea that there's no alternative to a hierarchy of rulers and ruled, that people just need to be submitted to the wills and whims of others, rather than organizing to democratic consensus for themselves and their communities. Apocalypse worship.
There you go.
This is gonna sound a bit
That was, what's it called?
strange,
Some anarchist stuff there.
but worshippers of the apocalypse also hold to a form of blind hope. Accelerationists, doomsday preppers, cultists, extreme survivalists, zombie video game enthusiasts, or believers in the end times. There seems to be a lot of people who are almost excited for collapse, or fixate really heavily on their ideal version of the end of the world. Like, they can't wait for the world to end. Whether it be so Jesus can finally return to earth, or so sinners can be cleansed, or so they can finally be vindicated in the eyes of those who disparage their precious doomsday bunkers. Honestly, people who respond in this way freak me out. Those who look at what's going on and, instead of resisting or trying to change the circumstances, they just accept it as things going according to schedule/prophecy, or they actively try to make things worse. Like, you ever wonder why so many evangelicals support the state of Israel and lobby so heavily in support, despite its brutal violence against Palestinians? It's because, according to their theology, Jewish people need to return to Israel ASAP so Jesus can come. Palestinians be damned. Literally. Moving on. Despair. Oh boy.
Doomers.
These are the people who tend to sit around and bemoan our fate. They probably talk like Eeyore too. They're worse than the apathetic because they weigh down our actual efforts with pessimism. They see the worst, expect the worst, and live in utter defeat. Defeat without any struggle. According to those in despair, nothing we do has any power to affect our future. Honestly, those on the doomer pill are just as misguided, in my eyes, as those hyped up on opium. So is there any way out?
He is calling out a lot of
before,
tendencies. That
we
is
don't
true.
need blind hope. And as is clear, we definitely don't need hopeless despair. That's an utterly false dichotomy. So how do we respond to this predicament? What we need is sobriety, clarity, lucidity. There are two more responses. Paul Shafirka points out in his article that those in stage 5 awareness, who see that the predicament encompasses all aspects of life, look to one of two paths. There's a third, a rejection of both paths, but for those people he recommends some serious counseling. I've adapted, interpreted, and remixed the two paths, so they're not one-to-one what he had in mind, but I think the gist is there. The inner path, self-healing. For some, the inner path seems most viable. It's a manifestation of that fake Gandhi quote. Be the change you want to see in the world. It digs in deep and personal, to look at collapse and retreat within to develop your self-awareness. To heal the world, first heal yourself, as they say. That old spiritual cliche still holds some truth. Some people take this to mean some sort of hyper-individual thing, and to some extent it is, but if you tilt and twist your head slightly, perhaps you can see it in a different light. It doesn't mean becoming a monk or an ascetic. It doesn't mean denying systems or ignoring painful truth. It involves taking in the gravity of what we're dealing with, such a grand-scale issue, and putting it in a personal context, unabstracting it and understanding it through a more manageable lens, taking your insights to influence and interchange with the insights of others. That's how I see it, at least. But I also don't see this path as satisfactory to me. What clicks with me is the outer path, balanced realism. Balanced realism is, well, hard to balance. There are a lot of people who confuse
What's the
realism
title of this
with
video? It's
pessimism.
called The
It's
Psychology
people
of
who think
Collapse.
realism is just when everything bad. Truthfully, taking the outer path of balanced realism means shaking off the burdens and blinders of pessimism and optimism, banishing alarmism, denialism, fatalism, hedonism, and all the other setbacks, loosening yourself from your own hopes and fears. Those in the outer path recognize and accept any number of possible outcomes. In the face of such a grand predicament, maintaining realism is difficult but necessary. You agitate for the best, but prepare for the worst. If you're on the outer path, you've let go of naivety and passivity. You're moving, acting, doing, adapting. Think of the permaculture movement, Rojava, Transition Network, Resilience.org, Post-Carbon Institute, Cooperation Jackson, and all the other ongoing movements and projects. None of which are perfect, mind you, none of which are going to save the whole world or anything, but they're looking local and they're making a difference. Forget wasting our time with party politics. We're acting right now. Realists on the outer path are building networks, building community, building sustainability. Bravo. Do you recognize these stages and responses in yourself and in others? Like I always say, we need each other. So reach out if you see that some are faltering and falling down a harmful path. I'll leave some resources in the description for those moving towards balance.
How often do I live stream? 3 days a
Those who
week.
choose
On
the
Mondays,
outer path
Tuesdays, and
want
Fridays.
Information and support. For those choosing both paths, I don't have as many resources for self-healing, so please, share resources in the comments.
God damn.
Let's keep the conversation going.
St. Andrew, healthy
Together.
as hell.
Peace.
Good stuff.
Thank you for watching. Please get this out here and hopefully reach people who are feeling lost and powerless right now. Classmates, colleagues, family, friends, whoever. Thanks once again to the family, Ongrad, Kobe Tamayo, John Vishy, and Swab.
Good stuff. Very happy. All right, what we got next? The Anglo-Somali War, the Somali Dervish Movement, the Great War, 1921. Okie dokie dokie. Let's see what this is all about.
This episode of The Great War is sponsored by CuriosityStream.
They're still doing the Great War? I thought the Great War ended in 2018. Okay, sure.
So go to curiositystream.com/thegreatwar and you can sign up. And if you do, you'll also get access to Nebula, where you can watch current Great War episodes and other creators ad-free. There'll be more information at the end of this video and in the video description. It's January 1921, and the Ethiopians have sent a key piece of news to the British. Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, the leader of the Somali Dervish movement that has fought Britain, Italy, and Ethiopia for 20 years, is dead. Hi, I'm Jesse Alexander, and welcome to The Great War. The parts of East Africa inhabited by Somali peoples had been colonized by the European powers relatively late in the 19th century. By the 1890s, the region was loosely divided between the British, the French, and the Italians. This foreign presence led to a resistance movement and a religious revival led by Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, which
Wasn't Somalia also like a sort of Egyptian colony at one point? No, it's Sudan, sorry. Blah, my bad.
fought a bitter campaign against the British, the Italians, and their Somali allies for 20 years. In this episode, we'll take a look at events in Somalia up until the death of Hassan and the end of his movement exactly 100 years ago in January 1921. In 1895, Somalia was a region mostly under the influence of the British and Italians, who'd established colonial rule but mostly stayed in a few port cities and exercised their power indirectly through local proxies. They had little presence or influence in the interior of the region. The Italians had treaties with the local sultanates of Orbia and Majertene, but their rulers regularly went their own way.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing too. Somalia was, parts of it anyway, were Omani colonies. And that's like a part that doesn't get talked a whole lot.
Somali society was even further fragmented.
Why there's actually like what's it called? Ibadi Islam is like Somalia is one of the few places where it's like practiced in a large way because of the influence of Oman.
Because it was based around independent pastoral tribes who often fought each other and raided into Ethiopian territory as well. This fragile situation was soon to be shaken even further by the return of Somalia to a man by the name of Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, who was called the Mad Mullah by the British, or the Sayyid by many Somalis, also known as the Master. Hassan had studied Islam in the British Protectorate of Aden under the influential cleric Muhammad Saleh, who preached a very strict brand of Islam associated with the Wahhabist revival in Arabia. Hassan was also unhappy with the presence of Europeans in his homeland, and legend has it that as he disembarked in Somalia, he argued with a British customs official and was angered at seeing Somali children in the care of French missionaries. Now, historians debate as to whether his religion or his anti-colonialist nationalism was more important, or whether they can even be separated. But what's clear is that both of these motivations underpinned a movement that would change the history of the Horn of Africa. Hassan opened a school in 1895 in Berbera, but soon moved to the interior, where he began to attract followers because of his charismatic preaching against materialism, heresy, and non-Muslim foreigners. By 1899, he had about 3,000 followers, who became known as dervishes. Soon after, he declared jihad against those Somalis he viewed as heretics, and also against the European powers. In the years that followed, his forces waged a determined guerrilla campaign against other Somali tribes, the Italians, the Ethiopians, and the
If I remember
British.
correctly, the Great War is run by some like German media company. I was in contact with them once, like a long time ago, and if I remember, that was like the deal.
The British responded by sending expeditionary forces against the dervishes, but even though they did manage to defeat Hassan's forces on some occasions, he simply retreated to the Nugal region in the interior, and they could not stamp out the movement. There were some major engagements in this conflict, with British newspapers reporting up to 1,200 dervish dead in a single battle in 1904. The Italians, on the other hand, were much more cautious. A naval officer expressed his doubts about the British approach. "I wish that I were mistaken, but I fear that the expedition will end in a fiasco. The Mad Mullah will become a myth for the British, who will never come across him, and a serious worry for the Italian administration and our sphere of influence." He would eventually be proven right, but for the moment, diplomacy was able to put a stop to the fighting. In 1905, the Italians signed a treaty with the Mullah, to which the British also agreed. The treaty created a territory of Nugal under Hassan's control. This new protectorate was also a convenient buffer state between the sultanates of Obbia and Majaten, which were both Italian clients, but were also in conflict with each other.
Man, the idea of Italians.
So by
getting involved in this kind of
1905,
colonization
the
is so
Islamic anti-colonial dervish movement under Mullah Hassan had taken root in the Nugal region. And Hassan now set about trying to build a new state, the likes of which Somalia had never seen before. Hassan's dervish state had a structure and an ideology that were unique in Somali practice up until that time. The mullah was the unquestioned head of the state, but he did have a council of trusted ministers as well. Next in the hierarchy came his bodyguards, followed by...
It just always blows me away that the Italians are... See, people complain, they're like, oh, you're breathing so heavily into the microphone, but then like I put it further away so you don't hear that, and then everyone's like, oh, I can't hear you. It's just weird to think of the Italians as being colonizers. It's just like a strange, weird thing of like these like early 20th century colonial situations.
The units of the regular army. The mass of his followers, sometimes consisting of whole tribes, changed as his fortunes waxed and waned. Somali historian Abdi Sheikh Abdi has characterized the dervish state like this. The mullah's organization had all the trappings of a theocratic or even martial state. Hassan's brand of Islamic teachings was one part of the ideological glue that held the dervish state together, but it was something new in Somali society. Traditionally, most Somalis had practiced a much less stricter form of Islam and had a relatively egalitarian culture, for men at least,
well, thank you,
which
William.
allowed most to speak
The concerned trolling is appreciated, I guess.
their minds openly, and they had no particular unifying ideology. In the mullah state, however, his word was law, and all the followers had to swear loyalty to both him and his teacher Saleh. Justice was harsh, including extensive use of the death penalty. British colonial administrator Douglas Jardine recorded his view of the mullah's state. The mullah was, of course, well aware that there is not in British Somaliland a native ruler who has any control over his tribe so effective that it would impel the tribesmen to do anything they disliked from loyalty to their duly constituted leader. This is why he cut offending throats and slew innocent women and children. Hassan didn't just try to coerce his followers, though, he also tried to persuade them. He appealed to anti-foreign sentiment and religion across tribal lines, which was quite a rare thing in Somali history. Although it is true that the Darod, Dulbuhanta, and Bakeri tribes were overrepresented in the dervish movement. Hassan made this pan-tribalism explicit. I also inform you that I am a pilgrim and a holy fighter, and have no wish to gain power and greatness in this world. Neither am I of the tribes Dolbohanta, the Warsangli, the Mijatain, nor the
Any puppy
Ogaden.
updates? No puppy updates yet. I don't know if I want to wait until spring or not. At the moment, the cats are still getting used to the new house. So, I'd have to wait until the cats feel like they're a little bit more normal in the house. And then maybe I can have a conversation about adding another animal to the house.
And I am not of the hypocrites. I am a dervish, hoping for God's mercy and consent and forgiveness and guidance.
Am I getting a puppy or a grown-up dog? Please don't delete this video after you are done. I don't delete these videos after I'm done. They go unlisted. But, yeah, whatever. I'm probably going to get a grown-up dog. I'm probably going to go to the pound, most likely.
Desire that all the country and the Muslims may be victorious by God's grace. Another reason for Hassan's popularity was that for a time he was able to provide some structure and some degree of security in the face of the anarchy that was plaguing much of the region. About 1/3 of the Somali population in the interior died during the chaos, and some judged they'd be better off inside the mullah's camp than in the maelstrom of tribal and colonial fighting around it. During the less unstable years of his reign, the dervish state was able to capture large flocks of livestock from other Somali tribes and also make some improvements to local infrastructure. After Hassan's eventual defeat, British Major H. Rain recalled the impressions of one of his men upon entering a dervish settlement. He was impressed by the strength of the place, the excellent buildings, and the general sanitary arrangements. A dam had been built across the stream, and an excellent garden had been laid. There was no doubt that the mullah was a thoroughly capable man. So in just a few years, the dervish state became a force to be reckoned with, even though it was in a constant state of flux due to violence and instability. But the peace of 1905 would not last for long. Starting in 1908, the situation began to deteriorate. There was extensive intertribal raiding, and there were tensions even within the mullah's own camp. He fell out with his former friend and advisor, who then traveled to Aden and denounced him.
The other thing about getting a dog right now is that to adopt a dog from the pound, you need like $400. And while like I could probably make that happen, like it's a lot of money. So I have to spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Him to his former teacher Saleh, who then wrote a letter to Hassan condemning him. I have before my eyes the news that you and your people have got into bad ways and no longer respect the Sharia.
It's a lot of money. Why? Because the place that I would be getting the dog from probably is doing like their shots and tagging and chipping and what's it called? Probably getting them fixed and all that kind of stuff.
Of this I have proof, for you and your people raid and rob and enjoy the women and wives of those men whom you kill and whose goods you take for your own. I do not approve of this, for it is against the law and the word of our holy prophet Muhammad. This conflict actually caused some of the dervishes to revolt, but Hassan prevailed. And even at this stage, he still had about 5,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry under his command. His forces broke the agreement with the Italians and attacked the Sultanate of Mijratain. But this time, they were driven out of the Nugal and into British Somaliland to the north, where he then clashed with British forces and their Somali allies, which forced them to retreat to the coastal towns. In 1913, Hassan made his base at Taleh, where there was a major fort. So
your ants run puppy mills? Oh my god. I never understood, like, can you imagine, like, because you'd think that people who would get into a business like breeding dogs would be like people who like animals, but then like puppy mills are like notoriously like bad places where dogs are like inbred and like their health is like not taken care of, and it's just like, it's a weird, like, who would run these things?
The dervish movement was now more of a British problem than an Italian one, even though it was still central to the politics of the entire region, as Italian Foreign Minister Francesco Guicciardini pointed out in 1910. Until the phenomenon of the mullah is eliminated or modified, it does not seem right to me to hope that the region will overcome the present phase of insecurity and of anarchy and enter into the...
It says here, adoption fee of a cat or a dog includes spay or neuter, microchip, flea treatment with revolution, initial vaccinations, initial deworming, rabies vaccination, 30 days of pet insurance, 7-day supply of food, and additional tests and treatment outlined in their medical record.
Phase of political and economic settlement. To remove this tumor from the breast of Somalia, we must employ a consistent, bland remedy, weakening the mullah by making the coastal and land blockade about him ever tighter, and by increasing the powers of resistance of the sultanates and of the peoples that surround him. So by 1913, Hassan's dervish movement was now based in British Somaliland after further...
This video feels like it's very long. Yeah, it's like 27 minutes.
...fighting. In 1914, the outbreak of the Great War would once again reshuffle the cards in the Horn of Africa. Now, Somalia was not directly involved in the Great War, but it was nonetheless affected. The Germans and Ottomans encouraged Muslims in Allied colonies to rise up. And in 1917, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed V even made Hassan Emir of Somalia, on paper at least, and even the paper letter informing him of his promotion was intercepted by the Italians. Hassan did request Ottoman troops, but none were sent, although the Central Powers did try to bring Ethiopia under their influence, and Hassan was positively disposed to an alliance with the new Muslim Emperor of Ethiopia, Iyyasu, in 1916. But since Iyyasu was deposed a few months later, any plans for cooperation with Ethiopia simply fell through. One German did end up in Somalia by accident during the war, but he was a mechanic who was taken to the mullah's court and forced to repair old rifles on pain of flogging. So with no support from the Central Powers and no Ethiopian alliance, the mullah was not able to take advantage of the British and Italian commitments in Europe during the World War. Although his situation was becoming more and more unfavorable,
this person definitely does not have the presence and energy of Indian Idol. That is for damn sure.
Hassan remained defiant. In March 1917, he vigorously denied British accusations that he'd been negotiating with the Central Powers. "It is you who have joined with all the peoples of the world, with harlots, with wastrels, and with slaves, just because you are so weak. But if you were strong, you would have stood by yourself as we do, independent and free. Your allies are strong, and it is because of your weakness that you've had to solicit, as does a prostitute." Overall, 1914 to 1918 was a relatively quiet period in Somalia in terms of actual fighting, but that would change after the armistice in November 1918. Hassan's dervish state was now in a vulnerable situation. There was no support forthcoming, no matter even how remote or symbolic, from the Ottomans, and his state was now hemmed in the interior, with no access to the coast or to any port city to import weapons. And it was surrounded by hostile tribes and British-funded scouts. This meant that Hassan could not offer as much protections to his followers as he had in the past, and this led to an increased amount of desertions. In addition, dervish efforts to build a more stable state now actually began to work against them. Instead of being able to wage mobile guerrilla warfare against their enemies as they had in the past, the dervishes now depended on a network of stationary forts. And the limited territory they controlled meant that they did not have the space to outmaneuver the slower British columns. With the end of the Great War in Europe, Britain was now...
This is a bit too much, I'm sorry. I am getting... It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. And we don't have time to watch that video or that video, so we can watch this one, I guess. How to be an immigrant British people like... from the MASH report. Alright, let's see what this is.
As an immigrant in Britain, sometimes it's not enough to merely contribute to the economy or prop up the NHS. It's also your job to make British people feel more comfortable with your existence.
Didn't we see this already?
So, here's my handy guide to being the kind of immigrant British people don't mind so much.
Or did I watch this?
First
I can't
of all,
tell
and
anymore.
I cannot recommend this highly enough, be white. Really.
Oh, it's still good.
That just isn't possible. Try to sound like this guy.
Good day.
Ahir hasn't chosen to be white, but he has gone and got himself a lovely little aristocratic accent. See how he sounds like Nish, but better?
Now, as Catherine pointed out, I did forget to choose to be white, which can be tricky. Catherine has loads of tiny brown bits on her, but they're known as freckles and are associated with being cute. Whereas I have one massive brown bit on me, and that's known as skin, and is associated with being see it, say it, sorted.
It is best not to be associated with a group that's into terrorism and popular consciousness. Though, remember, times do change. Next, English has to be your only language. British people are suspicious of anyone who knows more than one language. Way, why have you got a secret code that only you and your friends can understand? It's actually...
Oh my god, I hate people who are like this. The people who complain when they have to listen... Like, I don't understand the people who get huffy and complain that they can't eavesdrop on other people because they speak a language they don't know. It's such a weird thing to get hung up on.
Actually kind of childish if you think about it. Next up, in Britain, it's very important that you never be seen publicly sober. Am I right, Felicity?
You're right there, mate. They practically forget us Aussies are even immigrants because we're white, We can only speak English, and we fucking love a drink.
Nothing says useful contribution to society like ordering breakfast beers on a Tuesday.
Huh?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Man, remember drinking beers with friends? Man, I miss that shit.
Why are Australians mainly white? You can be religious, but it's best to stick to Christianity, or one that's so confusing as to appear benign.
For example, my family are Hindu, a belief system with a long and complex history, which in Britain is mainly used to market things to vegans.
Why'd I even bring that up? Which thing? Oh, no, because it said speak English, don't speak other languages in the video. That's why I brought it up.
Tipsy here. Looks like even solving British racism is being outsourced to India.
Oh, beer
Am I
with
right,
friends.
guys?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I miss beer with friends, and I don't know how. I don't know. It makes me sad.
I'm from East London.
Yeah, but
Like, beer with friends was like 60% of my social interaction before everything.
where are you originally from?
West London.
Jaeger bomb?
So remember, be white, only speak English, drink alcohol, and try not to be Muslim. If you followed each of these points correctly, then congratulations. You're being the kind of immigrant British people don't mind so much. Even you are here.
I am British.
That's the spirit.
Make Friday the day drinking stream. Not a bad call. I live suspiciously close to an LCBO, so I can do that now. But yeah, it always drives me nuts when people... It drives me nuts that people get driven nuts by the idea of people speaking a language they don't know when they're not talking to you. There's no way I can process why that's a problem, but for some reason people get mad about it. It's like just being reminded that people who aren't them exists make them mad. Alrighty. What we got next? Were hyena, the terrifying shapeshifters of African lore. Ooh. I do like a good monstrum, and I think I've seen this video, and it's good.
In the African wilderness, a wild beast desecrates your loved one's graves and spawns disease and blight with just a glance in your direction. Able to wander essentially undetected among people during the day, at night it transforms into a terrifying creature, the were hyena. Associated with death, gluttony, and greed, this monster joins the ranks of werewolves, selkies,
Spooky.
and other shape-shifting monsters. Were creatures, humans or animals that can shape-shift from one form into another, are common across the globe, taking different forms based on the real predators in the local area. Most familiar to a Western audience is the werewolf, but given that there are 4 different species of hyena in Africa, it's not so surprising that the version of the monster
Yo, this hyena is punk as fuck. It's like a mohawk thing.
we find in that continent looks more like this than this. There's way more to these monsters than in the Buffy episode.
The students have been possessed by the hyenas?
Yes.
So let's look at the were hyena of African folklore and how the Beta Israel religious group became commonly accused of taking the guise of this monster. I'm Dr. Emily.
Oh yeah, the persecution of what's it called, like African Jews. Oh boy, this is gonna go to some fun places, friends.
Zarka, and this is Monstrum. A were hyena is most commonly believed to be a hyena masquerading by day as a human, as opposed to the more Western figure of a werewolf, which is a human who turns into a wolf usually at night. A were hyena's human skin is the false one, and while a were hyena in human form may be noticed by an unusually hairy body or nasally voice, more often than not, they can walk among humans unnoticed. In the wild plains of Africa, hyenas stand out as repugnant animals. Though often thought of merely as opportunistic scavengers, in reality, their cunning tactics, knife-like teeth, and surprising swiftness make these animals formidable foes. Hyenas are often considered the outsiders of the animal world, characterized as unnatural and disgusting since they consume rotten flesh, and associated with greed since they steal the kills of other animals. While they won't turn down their nose at rotting flesh, hyenas are intelligent hunters capable of taking down wildebeest and antelope. Add in a human skin suit so it can wander among us by day, and you have yourself one terrifying monster. In Sudan, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and some parts of Morocco and Eritrea, where hyena are associated with groups of outsiders who are accused of possessing magical abilities and the powerful stare of an evil eye. Called Buddha or Boda, a derogatory title, Buddha are thought to control animal spirits intentionally or unintentionally, cause illness, poison people's food, and shapeshift into a hyena. Buddha and where
Why Morocco? Probably came through trans-Saharan trade.
hyenas are most often associated with artisan trades like metalworking, weaving, and pottery, and their evil powers are said to be passed on from generation to generation, much like skills of a trade. Almost all Buddha are described as landless people, and the people most commonly associated with landlessness and of being smiths and potters in Eastern Africa are the Ethiopian Jews. Self-identifying as the Beta Israel, this group is a religious and professional minority in the largely Christian country of Ethiopia that coalesced into a more unified group by the 15th century. Origins of the group's faith are hotly debated in scholarship, but what is generally agreed upon is that the group started in one of the so-called heretic communities in Ethiopia. People outside of the group called the Beta Israel Ehud or Falasha, which at their base meaning refers to Jews and the Jewish community, but are also synonymous with exiles and those who practice magic. Both terms are considered derogatory.
Oh God, yeah.
The name Falasha as a designator for the Beta Israel first became a widespread term in the 16th century and onward.
Friggin' got fucking owned by copyright shit. It'll be back.
By then, the definition of a Falasi is a landless person, a wanderer, an exile. So how and why did the Beta Israel become associated with were hyenas? In the late 15th and early 16th century, the masonry and carpentry skills of the Beta Israel were highly valued. Their contributions to infrastructure and architecture led to a rise in their economic and social mobility.
This is why I can't, what's it called, for all y'all on Twitch, this is why I hate, it's one of the things I hate about YouTube's Twitch platform or stream platform. I guess man, how is it that people got away with streaming episodes of Rick and Morty for years, but I can't watch a video with my audience? This is weird.
In the Imperial Army. Their rewards for their skills on and off the battlefield even led to the gifting of titles and land to the Beta Israel, which, if you remember, directly contradicts the definition of Buddha. Then in 1769 Ethiopia, Emperor Eos was assassinated, causing political and social upheaval and pushing marginalized peoples, including the Beta Israel, into other trades like pottery and smithing. It also placed their religious practices under attack. These new craft professions of the Beta Israel, smithery for the men and pottery for the women, had one big thing in common: fire. Across history, fire is associated with magic, because what's more magical than using fire to transform a seemingly useless material like iron or clay into a knife or a bowl? Christians believed Beta Israel's superior skills were supernatural. It is an almost universal theme in African cultures that metalworkers, like the Buddha, are associated with malevolent spellcraft. Such artisans are often landless, moving from place to place as necessary for their profession, leasing farming land as tenants from Christian landholders. Their more nomadic lifestyle.
You know, okay, so a boss is losing his fucking shit about what's it called? To hyenas. You know, there's entire organizations that are about trying to rehabilitate hyenas in popular culture because they're such a maligned creature, despite being keystone species in their ecosystem and like, you know, being good. And it's like, that's, you know, a thing. Should we just stop watching this video so that we can move on and have get YouTube back? Guess we'll watch a different thing. Thanks, YouTube. Oh, this should do way better.
Would you rather fight a bunch of kindergartners? I want to fight kindergartners. See, that's not even the whole...
Those kids are getting slapped.
Hey everybody, today my brother pushed me, so I'm starting a Kickstarter to put him down. The benefits of killing him would be I would get pushed way less.
Who's in our bathroom? I hired a drunk girl to compliment us. Oh. Are you a model? Yes.
Why do we even need coming out day? Everyone's a little gay.
Well, I'm a big gay, and I'm coming out today as the world's biggest gay.
You get one on your knee from tripping, and now this?
Mom, for the last time, this is not a hickey.
In the winter, I like to dress in a cozy black jacket, shirt, and jeans. In the summer, I wear the same thing because I look good in black and I'm willing to suffer.
Hey, so I think you're pretty cute, so I was wondering if you wanted to go out. Pretty cute? I'm a goddess.
Oh, well, that was fun. Yeah, sorry, YouTube people watching, but YouTube fucking nuked my channel because they didn't, I guess they didn't like me watching Monstrum because it's PBS, and PBS has a pretty tight relationship with YouTube. So, you know, notorious copyright trolls, fucking PBS. Oh, well, guess we can't do that anymore. So, I guess we're going to watch a video called How the Kim Dynasty Designed Pyongyang. That should be fun. Let's hope YouTube doesn't nuke me for this one.
This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream.
Hey, I know this guy. City Beautiful? Yeah, I know, what's it called? I had dinner with this guy at VidCon one year.
Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea, an extremely isolated and secretive nation of 25 million people on the northern half of the Korean peninsula. Pyongyang is home to almost 3 million of those citizens, including Kim Jong-un, the nation's young supreme leader, and the grandson of North Korea's founder, Kim Il-sung. Kim Jong-un rules over a nation which may have the worst human rights record in the world. The organization Human Rights Watch considers North Koreans to be some of the world's most brutalized people.
Was the dinner in a beautiful city? No, it was in fucking, what's it called? Anaheim, California. A very unbeautiful city.
The government restricts freedom of association, expression, and movement. It uses detention, torture, and executions to maintain control of the populace. Pyongyang was almost completely rebuilt after the Korean War by Kim Il-sung according to his own unique brand of socialism. The economy is tightly controlled and residents live in government housing with no property rights. This video is all about the world's most secret and dangerous national capital. We begin the story 3,000 years ago, but spend most of the time talking about the post-Korean War city during the era of the Kim Dynasty. Despite what you may think, Pyongyang is a rapidly growing and changing metropolis, and is even showing signs of opening up its economy and society.
Reject Juche, embrace hyena. Oh man.
Pyongyang straddles the banks of the Taedong River in the west central part of the country.
YouTube hates hyenas.
The river is wide and deep and connects the heart of the nation to the Yellow Sea. It's a pretty good river to begin and found a prominent city on, too. Many great cities have a founding myth, and Pyongyang is no exception. According to legend, the city was founded by the god king Daegun in 2333 BCE, though historians put the founding date closer to the 7th century BCE. Daegun was said to have been the son of a god and a female bear. North Korea's regime actually claims to have found Daegun's tomb back in 1993, though unsurprisingly that claim is unverified and is likely fabricated. Either way, having a founder with bear DNA is a major flex, as the kids say. Pyongyang's prominence persisted past its Bronze Age origins, and it was the capital of other shifting regimes in the next several centuries. By the 5th century CE, Pyongyang was the cultural center of the Goguryeo Kingdom, which controlled much of the Korean peninsula. The city had a library with tens of thousands of volumes, palaces, gardens, a fortress, and other large buildings. Pyongyang then entered a period where it frequently changed hands. Mongols occupied the city in 1232, Chinese rebels seized the city in 1359, the Japanese captured it in 1593, then the Manchurians in 1627, and the Japanese again in 1895. All of this capturing made its people wary of foreigners, foreshadowing the secretive and isolationist policies of the 20th century. It was during the Japanese occupation from 1910 to 1945 that Pyongyang began to grow and modernize rapidly. Occupation was incredibly harsh on Koreans, but
North
Japan made Korea the second.
Capitalist. I mean, it literally sells its citizens to Russian like lumber companies to do free labor. So, I don't know. It enslaves its own people for profit. I wonder what that's called.
Most industrialized nation in Asia after Japan itself. Japan introduced things like factories, movie theaters, and schools to this traditionally agrarian nation, but most of the fruits of Korean labor ended up in Japan. After the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrendered and Korea was no longer under Japanese control. The US and Soviet governments agreed to administer the peninsula and split it at the 38th parallel. Pyongyang was in the northern Soviet half of the peninsula. Initially, the Soviet Union agreed to occupy North Korea for 5 years, then allow for independence, something not too popular with local Koreans who preferred immediate independence. During this time, guerrilla leader Kim Il-sung rose to prominence as a communist leader after leading raids against the occupying Japanese forces from the previous period. In 1948, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, better known as North Korea, was officially formed, with Kim as premier. Pyongyang was the de facto capital, a title made official in the 1972 Constitution. I'm not going to go into an entire history of the Korean War, but I will say that nearly 75% of Pyongyang was destroyed by US bombings between 1950 and 1953. After the war, large amounts of the city had to be entirely rebuilt. The previous city structure and organic form grown throughout the centuries was largely ignored, and the new government, with help from the Soviet Union, reimagined the city as a communist paradise.
That's such a communist thing to do. Like, we have all this stuff already built. This infrastructure already exists. Nah, fuck it. We're gonna make it brand new from scratch. Don't worry about it. It's like, okay, bud.
It's fair to compare Pyongyang to Brasilia or Nur Sultan, new capitals essentially built from scratch. We'll talk about the monumental architecture that comes with a new capital in a second, but first we have to acknowledge that in 1953, the year the Korean War ended, the city was home to over 550,000 people, many of whom were now homeless. The city needed to be rebuilt rapidly, and it was. Korean planners looked to the Soviet Union for inspiration, and much of the early rebuilding looks very much like a typical Soviet city. You can walk through many parts of Pyongyang and barely realize you're in a Southeast Asian city. Much of the historic architecture is gone, with only a few vestiges remaining. In its place, stark concrete housing blocks gave the city a bleak
God, that's fucking Soviet as fuck. Just apartment blocks everywhere.
Uniformity. Neighborhoods were organized according to Soviet principles as well. Each neighborhood consists of about 5,000 residents and includes shared amenities like a grocery store, post office, clinic, and schools. You can check out my video on Soviet cities for more information on this. The parts of the city not covered in Soviet housing is filled with monuments, squares, and public buildings dedicated to Kim Il-sung, his son Kim Jong-il, and his son Kim Jong-un, the three leaders of North Korea since the war. The most prominent space is Kim Il-sung Square at the heart of the city. It's large enough to host a rally with 100,000 people, and you can...
This is like part of why, like, if I ever had the opportunity to actually go to North Korea, I'd probably take it because, like, there's nowhere else in the world where you can see this kind of, like, almost like Stalin-era Soviet stuff anymore. It's really hard to count. Like, it's like an actual living, like, Soviet Union-style country in the 2020s. Which I would be very, like, it's a time capsule, almost.
Actually see the markings on the pavement where people should stand for choreographed dances and rallies. Across the Taedong River stands the Juche Tower, built in 1982. It's 170 meters tall and built with 25,550 granite blocks, one for every day of Kim Il-sung's life.
God, this is so communist.
Life. The North Korean government uses public spaces and monuments to convey its ideology and project state power. Kim Jong-il actually wrote an architectural treatise that codified the principles of designing monumental space. This space needs to have a focus point, like a statue or portrait. It must have a background or backdrop that blocks out everything behind the focus point, enhancing it. The background should be further extended by a frame of symmetrical elements. Finally, the space should project out. There should be one side of the space left open. When you combine monumental architecture with Soviet housing, the result is sort of a bleak urban form. The Kims themselves would come to resent the Sovietness of their city. Their unique brand of socialism, called Juche or self-reliance, prized Korean nationalism and a Korean identity. But the city hasn't stood still since the 1950s. The city is now home to over 3 million residents, so there's been pressure to Koreanize the city as well as to make room for those new residents. This has led to some pretty dramatic changes over the last 60 years or so. What's happened? First of all, Kim Jong-un had the Soviet housing painted bright pastel colors to add a little warmth to the drab scene.
I guess, like, there was an attempt. Oh, man. You actually see, like, what's it called? The kind of color you see here kind of reminds me of a lot of, like, big cities in Latin America. Like Mexico City has a bit of a look like this. Or, actually, it reminds me a lot of Cancun and, like Santo Domingo and stuff like that.
It's honestly not a bad way of making the city seem less depressing on a budget. Second, new districts have been added. You can see how different the buildings in the Murray Street area look compared to the surrounding older buildings. The same can be said for the new district along Ryumyong Street. It's a stark contrast from previous eras. No more beige concrete blocks. Third, existing Soviet housing is being replaced. One prominent example is the new prestigious residential area along Changjiang Street in the central city. The new towers would not be out of place in Shanghai or Tokyo. They're home to some of the most elite party members in North Korea. Finally, North Korea has doubled and tripled down on monumental architecture in an attempt to make the city more interesting and indoctrinate citizens better. There's the Tower of Eternal Life with twin arches spanning a 6-lane roadway. And there's the Arch of Triumph, another monument built from 25,550 blocks. Another arch, the Arch of Reunification, is dedicated to the idea of a reunified Korea, reunified under Kim rule. Even the sports stadiums are iconic and monumental. You've got the indoor stadium with the Kim portraits on the outside. The Pyongyang ice rink is like any stadium.
Those, like, what's it called? Like leader portraits everywhere. Like, oh my God, so Soviet, so like, you know, communist dictator-y look. Like I said, I want to go because I want to see this kind of shit. Because, like, this is like kind of like a time capsule.
Stadium I've ever seen, and it's a city landmark. Finally, the Mayday Stadium is one of Asia's largest, and built to show that Pyongyang could host an Olympics just like Seoul when they did back in 1988. Ryugyong Hotel may be the most famous example of this modern take on monumental architecture. It's a 105-story pyramid that is probably the single most iconic building in Pyongyang. For years, it was missing its all-glass facade, and it was such an embarrassment that the government would Photoshop it out of skyline photos. Today, it's the tallest unoccupied building in the world. The new growth areas, not including the monuments and intimidating architecture, now make Pyongyang feel more connected and modern than ever before.
Hey,
it's not all bland and gray anymore. And I haven't even mentioned Pyongyang's parks. The government says that it has more parkland per capita than any city in East Asia, though it's always good to be skeptical of North Korea's claims. That said, there are a substantial number of parks and playgrounds in the city. Parks are where the residents are the most free. They can find some solace and privacy away from the constant surveillance. Streets are another major public space in the city. Car ownership is still fairly rare, so streets are relatively quiet. There's a growing middle class in Pyongyang, and taxis are an affordable luxury that is increasingly popular. But for most people, they either walk or take transit. Pyongyang has a public alarm that goes off at 7 a.m. every morning that signals the start of rush hour. Residents have the option to take buses, trams, trolleys, or the metro system.
It has a citywide alarm clock. Oh my God. That feels very like Soviet era too, doesn't it?
Metro system consists of 2 lines and was mostly built in the 1960s. It's one of the deepest metro systems in the world, and the stations can serve as bomb shelters, a useful feature in a country seemingly always on the brink of war. It's also the cheapest system in the world to ride. A ticket costs about 1/2 of a US cent. We also need to circle back on public squares. For all of the images of military parades and choreographed celebrations, the public squares are just big public spaces most of the time. You'll see kids rollerblading and people taking strolls. You'll even see temporary kiosks selling snacks and lottery tickets. It would be a pretty normal scene were not for the giant paintings of the Kims in the background. There are other elements of Pyongyang life that are beginning to feel normal, at least by our Western standards. North Korea's economy is operated from the top down, but lately small-scale private enterprise is being tolerated by the government and embraced by residents.
See, like that, I don't want, like, they're always like, man, how do we move things forward? And of course, like, states are gonna state, and so like, oh, the way to modernize, obviously, is to implement aspects of a new ideology, which still concentrates power in a small elite. So therefore, that doesn't have to change, obviously.
The city now has banks where the residents can save money and earn interest. The government is allowing some to start new businesses, from small market stalls to department stores and app development studios. These businesses must source their own materials and find customers, a very different way of operating from the normal government command and control economic system. While Pyongyang residents have been given some new financial freedoms, nearly every other aspect of their lives is still under government control.
Wow, you sound like an anarchist or something there, yeah. Well, guilty as charged.
Control, including the environment they live in. Housing is government owned and public spaces are designed to exert control and indoctrinate citizens. No other city on Earth attempts to do this as explicitly as Pyongyang. That's why the city is so fascinating, because cities are the combinations of society and built form. And with a society as draconian as North Korea, you're going to end up with a pretty unique built form. Like I said earlier, Ryugyong Hotel is one of the most distinctive buildings in Pyongyang. Now, I didn't think an extended discussion of that one building made sense in the main video, but I go into more detail in the version of this video posted on Nebula.
It's another Nebula thing, huh? Well, if you win the lottery, they throw you in a concentration camp for being anti-revolutionary. I mean, I don't think there is a lottery or whatever, but I don't know. I think you're trying to make a joke, and I'm ruining it. All right. We've got a little bit of time left. Let's see what else we can put together. Don't have time for that video. This one. The Obsolete Man. Best.
Wordsworth. Romney. Obsolescence.
You walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but
Is
one
the
that
Twilight Zone?
This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of
Would
history.
you ever go on Nebula? I mean, if Nebula's for people who are part of standard TV, and I have been very interested in trying to get hook up with them, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Since the beginning of time, it has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach.
NBC's going to airstrike the stream. Oh no!
But like every one of the super states that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
I don't exactly know what the point of this is, but let's see where this goes.
This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth. In his last 48 hours on Earth, he's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated. Because he is built out of flesh, and because he has a mind.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete.
Man, there's like no limit to like what the authoritarianism of the Soviet Union did to hurt like left-wing causes, it seems.
The purpose of this hearing is to make a finding in the matter and make a sentence.
And also just the fact that like everything's propaganda, fucking Cold War propaganda bullshit. But also, I hate how much like the kangaroo courts and purges and stuff like that have basically like completely fucked up left-wing movements.
Accordingly, do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Your occupation, Mr. Wordsworth?
Librarians.
A librarian. Having to do with books.
Yes, sir.
Books.
Oh no, books.
Since there are no more books, Mr. Wordsworth, there are no more libraries. The field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. Your rights are as follows, Mr. Wordsworth. You are to be liquidated within a period of 48 hours. You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth.
A lie. No man is obsolete.
You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing
Man, I
more
feel like I've
than a
heard this
reminder
quoted
to you
more than I've
that
actually
you
seen this
cannot
clip.
destroy truth by burning pages.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth.
This feels like it's more of a criticism of fascism and Nazism, but maybe that's just because of my POV on it.
Human being.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth.
Like a lot of this stuff about like burning books and shit, it feels more like Nazi stuff.
Delusions that you inject into your veins with printer's ink. The narcotics that you call literature, poetry, essays of all kind, all of it an opiate. You have
It was the Nazis who did the book burning.
dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
I don't care. I tell you, I don't care. I'm a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought aloud, that thought lives, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
The Chancellor, the late Chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete. But so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete.
I mean, I would say that, yeah. Although that kind of fits all states, so I don't know. All right, guys, it's 2 o'clock, so we're going to go raid Emily. Everybody, it's been a great week. Very, very long week for me. Hopefully you guys will have a wonderful and relaxing weekend. We'll be back on Monday for more content. So in the meantime, let me just get the raid going. Yeah, and be good to each other and all that kind of stuff. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you guys on the new week. Goodbye.